Here we are again. This place still gives me the chills.
Well, at least we now have our new orcish friends to delight us with their company.
You don't seem happy about this.
I just don't like the idea of putting my fate into the hands of these savages. What happened there at Barga Gore was nothing short of a bloodbath.
Revolts tend to be bloody.
I know, but... never mind.
In any case, with our new allies, we should be able to go look for the stones. Let's talk at the forge.
Who is this? My strange flesh friends! Did they bring more meat? Ah, yes, they did! Forest goblins, he sees. Good flesh, nice and green. Power will be pleased. Yes? What do strange flesh people want?
I think we'll be off now. Farewell.
Huh?
Tahar, what is it?
There's one thing I've been wondering about. After we parted at the hideout, what exactly happened? How did you and my father part ways?
Good question. I guess it all started with the relics, the tomes. You remember them, right?
Yes. He was hoping they'd help him to win the war.
Exactly. And there was this one moment when he found the 5th tome, when I came to a realization. You see, there were all those bodies. Enemies, but also many of our people. We had shed so much blood, Tahar. So much blood for our cause. But Asamo, he didn't care. If there was any grief in his eyes, I couldn't see it. And as dramatic as it may sound, that's when I finally understood that we had lost our cause. This wasn't about ideals, about us mages anymore. It was about him. Whatever his intentions had become.
And that's the reason Zane, Helena, and I betrayed him. Come on, do you really want to tell us you didn't see that before? The tomes were all about power.
No, you misunderstand. I knew it was about power. But Asamo always told us that he would use that power for the greater good. And it's not that far off. I mean, can't you imagine? With the power of the tomes, we could have united the world. Even made it a better one. No more persecution of the deviant. No more wars. No more suffering.
You mean an aristocracy, with a couple of mages playing God?
There's always someone playing God. And honestly, don't you think the world would have been a better place if there were gods who actually cared? Who involved themselves in politics? I do. But be that as it may, what we can be certain of is that the world the Purity is envisioning would be a far worse one than anything us mages could have ever created. They must be stopped at all costs.
I'll be off.
Yes? What is it?
Goodbye. What's next?
Yes, Corporal? How can I help?
Well, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. How did you become an assassin?
Why do you want to know?
Because I want to know my allies.
I see. In short, my mother sold me. And after an incident, my owner noticed my talents. He started to train me to carry out jobs for him. And when I was 17, he had an accident. I've been an independent assassin ever since.
Your mother sold you? But where? Why?
Because she needed the coin, and already had 4 children to feed. And as for your first question, where there is demand, there is a market, particularly in a big city like Greyfell. It's not as uncommon as you might believe.
You're saying there's a slave market in Greyfell?
Slaves, sex, murdering for pleasure. Just imagine every dark desire you can think of, and you know what the Greyfell Bazaar has to offer. I find it interesting that this surprises you. Didn't you serve in the Royal Army for 8 years?
I only joined shortly before the Mage Wars started, and the Greyfell affairs were the responsibility of the Greyfell Guard. I just didn't know.
Well, now you do. I do not agree with the purity of light in most aspects, but they are right when they say there are many sinners in this world. If you believe in the concept of sin, that is.
Even if she needed the money, that's despicable.
Well, to her credit, she didn't take it lightly. At least as far as I can remember. I was only 7 when that happened.
That doesn't make it better. How do you feel about this? Your mother selling you off?
Well, I used to feel strongly about it. Now I've simply accepted it as part of my past. But there are plenty of reasons for that.
That's quite the story.
Is it?
So, who is this man who bought you?
I won't talk about that. This chapter of my past is done, and I want it to stay buried.
I understand.
I'm glad you do. So, tell me, Pariah, how did you become the betrayer's child in the first place? It's rare for a child to defy their own father.
He lost his vision. When he started the rebellion, it was about the safety of mages, but he became more and more radical. I just couldn't stand by and watch anymore.
That's admirable. Well, thank you for sharing this with me. Either way, is there anything else you need?
Will do.
What do you want?
Just checking how you're settling in.
I'm good. Thanks. Interesting place you found yourself here, I'll give you that.
Back in the cave, you told me that you fought that demon in order to gain control over it. I'd still like to know how that works.
It's complicated.
That's it?
For now.
How did you end up in Barga Gore?
It's a long story. Suffice to say, I've been on the road for quite some time now, and Barga Gore just happened to be my last spot before I ran into you. Let's talk about you instead. You've gathered a ton of followers, one outcast after another. Tell me, Tahar, do you trust them?
I'm still trying to figure that out.
Good luck with that. To be honest, I don't understand how you can do it. You have that look about you, and it's driving me nuts. It literally says hurt me.
What do you mean by that?
I've observed you on the way back from Barga Gore. The way you move, the way you talk. I get why other people follow your lead. I really do. You simply have some kind of strange charisma. It's not visible at first glance, but it's there. You give people hope. I guess that's what it boils down to. You attract outsiders, and you get them to march under your banner.
How is that a bad thing?
It's a bad thing because you're too careless. All these people, did it ever occur to you that they're outsiders for a reason? The treacherous orc, the renegade elf, the exiled dwarf? Still, you trust them. Even if you put your stern face on, I can see that you do. And it's why people follow you. But trust doesn't protect from betrayal. But let's stop this right here, okay? I'm sure you have things to do, and so do I.
Yes?
Huh?
Can you tell me more about your craft? About demonology?
And why's that? Thinking about a career change?
It's certainly a powerful school of magic. I could see myself dabbling in it.
Well, the moment you start dabbling with it is the moment you enjoy a very painful death. There's a reason demonology is forbidden. Most people who mess with it die. But sure, if you have questions, ask.
Let's start with the basics. What's the core principle of demonology?
It's simple. You study demons and their powers, and bind them to your will. And thus you gain access to their powers. Take a devourer. Once you've studied and subdued her to your will, you can access her strength. And I'm not talking about merely summoning her. You can channel her powers.
How is that supposed to work? Channeling their powers.
Hard to describe. Just imagine that the demon becomes a part of you. You connect it with your magic, so to speak. And when needed, you can call on it to help you. It's not just the power that comes with it. It's also the feeling. Channeling the essence of a Zarek Nar, a tribe eater. It's a feeling that compares to nothing else in this world. You can't understand it till you've done it.
So in order to bind them, you need to beat them in battle, correct?
Well, it's a bit more complicated than that, but yeah. In a nutshell, that's it.
And I'm guessing that's what makes it so dangerous.
Among other things, yes. What can also happen is that your body simply can't handle a demon's unleashed essence. It can cause a brain rupture similar to what these masks the Purity use. And, to be honest, that happens to 8 out of 10 students of demonology. They subdue a demon, get excited, and let all their energy rush in at once. As a result, their brains explode like a watermelon hit with a warhammer.
Sounds painful. So, why exactly is demonology forbidden?
Because it's dangerous. And because demonologists can be extremely powerful. More than some members of the ruling caste would like to see.
Is there a limit to how many demons you can bind?
No. If there were, I wouldn't still be traveling after all this time.
Interesting. Thanks for the insight.
Sure. Huh?
So, have we gotten past that I don't trust you thing? I want to know more about you.
Well, there isn't that much to know about me, Tahar. I'm a demonologist from Kalea, and I've been on the road for a couple of years now. That's it.
Wait, you're Kalayan?
Yeah. And I know I don't have the accent, but that was a lot of training.
What made you come to Northander?
Long story, and I don't want to talk about it. Anything else, Tahar? If not, let me get back to my grimoire.
Can you tell me more about Kalea? What's it like there?
It's a pretty general question, Corporal.
What are Chileans like, compared to Nortandians?
Good question. I don't spend that much time socializing, so I don't know if I can give you the answer to that. But all in all, Chileans are a lot less stiff than you Nort folks. Chileans like to sing, to dance, and to fuck. They do it a lot, sometimes at the same time. They admire philosophy and magic, and being good in either of those makes you the equivalent of a famous bard here in Greyfell. On the other hand, the people are two-faced. That's a lot better here in Nortander. You have your little intrigues, but you generally say what you mean, which Chileans see as almost primitive.
Kalea is a city-state, isn't it? Like Everlight.
Yeah. Well, almost. When people say Kalea, they usually refer to the chain of islands in the Sea of Dreams, a couple of miles from Imperia. However, only the big one in the middle is really inhabited. And that one's pretty much just a massive city called Kalea. Nobody can remember the names of the other islands, not even the Kaleans themselves. But yeah, it's essentially a city-state. And even though Kalea is small, it's very powerful. You know, spices, sugar, sea jewels, all the kind of stuff a tropical paradise has to offer.
Rich as a Chilean, isn't that how they say?
Yeah, though that ignores the fact that there's thousands of Chileans starving to death in the slums.
Do you happen to know if Kalea is affected by the Bloodburn too?
Don't think so, no. At least I haven't heard anything.
There's been a lot of tension between Nortander and Kalea during the Mage War. How is the situation now?
I haven't been back since, so I couldn't tell you. But according to the sailors, things have gotten better.
Can you tell me more about your craft? About demonology?
And why's that? Thinking about a career change?
I'm just curious.
Are you? I hope you do realize that demonology isn't a forbidden school for no reason. Most people who mess with it die. But sure, if you have questions, ask.
Let's start with the basics. What's the core principle of demonology?
It's simple. You take a devourer. Once you've studied and subdued her to your will, you can...
Interesting. Thanks for the insight.
Sure.
Yes, Corporal? How can I help?
Well, there's something I've been meaning to ask you.
Why do you want to know?
No particular reason, I suppose. I'm just curious.
I see. In short,
Your mother sold you?
because she needed the coin and already had 4 children to feed.
So, who is this man who bought you?
I won't talk about that. This chapter of my past is done and I want it to stay buried.
To me, that sounds like you're hiding something.
I am. But it should be of no relevance to you. So tell me, Pariah, how did you become the betrayer's child in the first place? It's rare for a child to defy their own father.
Let's see. Now
So, this is it? Your fabled fortress?
you don't sound...
It'll do. All I need is a good forge. My ingenious mind will do the rest. Though these orcish smiths you've employed so far certainly don't deserve their title.
What do you mean?
Because they are amateurs, and that's putting it lightly. Just give me some coin for material and send them my way. Then I can teach them what a true orcish axe or armor should look like.
Will do. So long, Berg.
Yes, of course. Goodbye.
Interesting.
Yes. Looking for some orcish craftsmanship?
Got it. Let's see.
Corporal? Need anything?
Tell me a bit about your time on the road. What was it like?
Is that a command, Corporal?
Please?
All right, but I'm afraid there isn't so much to tell. Have you ever been on the road by yourself?
A long time ago, yes.
Well, then you know how wearisome it can get. Sleeping under the stars sounds romantic at first, until you realize that most of the time it's sleeping in the mud, in drizzle. Most of the time, your stomach and your purse are empty, and your feet are full of blisters. And, of course, there's the constant danger, especially if you're traveling on your own.
Did you ever have a companion?
Some, yeah, but most of it was just temporary. Though there was one I traveled with for longer. Quentin.
How did you meet?
Coincidence. A small town between Finn and Mir and Lar. We played dice together and he cheated. When I called him out on it, he tried to turn tail. But one of the other guests stopped him for me. They wanted to go give him a beating, but I told them to stop. He gave me back my money and we started talking. And, believe it or not, we found that we got along quite well.
So you started traveling together? With a thief?
I wouldn't call him that. He was just young and careless. We ended up traveling for almost a year.
What was his story? Where was he headed?
Into the blue, same as me. He had quite an interesting task, but I wouldn't feel comfortable sharing it with you, to be honest. He wouldn't want that.
I see. What was your relationship?
You mean... No, we were just friends. He was way too young for my liking, and I think I was too old for him. We were more like sister and brother.
Huh. So how did you split up? What happened?
Nothing dramatic. We came by a village and decided to rest there for a while. The roads had become quite dangerous due to the mage wars, and we didn't want to go out unprepared. I did some healing for the villagers, and he helped out the local smith. He liked it, and the smith wanted him as an apprentice, so he stayed. I was surprised and a bit hurt at first, but then I realized it was probably for the better. I still think of him sometimes, though.
Huh. And how did you make a living?
That was the easiest part. I healed people.
With light magic?
Yes and no. It was my magic that mended the wounds, but since mages are often met with suspicion, how shall I say, got a little creative. Frankly put, whenever I treated someone, I gave him a magical potion to drink, which was just water mixed with some harmless herb to give it color. The rest was laying on hands to help the potion's effect, which was pure light magic and how I did the actual healing.
And that worked?
Better than you'd think. People were fighting over my panacea as if I was Ellen incarnate, while cursing the evil defilers who had caused this war. Ironic, isn't it?
Do you miss it sometimes? The vagabond life?
Well, we're still vagabonds somehow, aren't we? But I know what you mean. And yeah, I sometimes do. The wind on my skin, the vastness of the wildlands, and the fact that all you have to think about is the mile ahead of you. It's another world. There was this one night I'll never forget. I had made a camp at a clearing, set up campfire, and I was leaning against a tree, slowly drifting toward sleep. Then, all of a sudden, it started to rain. Not just the usual drizzle, it was bucketing down, drowning everything, the earth, the noise, the plants around me. My first impulse was to jump up, to find shelter, get my things into the dry. But I didn't. Instead, I saw. I don't know how else to put it. All of a sudden, there was this deep sense of peace. As if all my life I had been chasing something without knowing it myself. And in that moment had found it. So I just watched. I sat there and I watched. That feeling lasted until the sun came up. And then I fell asleep. When I woke up, it was gone.
That sounds beautiful.
And a bit dramatic. But yeah, it was beautiful. I've never felt something like that again.
And what do you make of it now?
Truth be told, I don't know. But it changed something. Even though I cannot say what it is.
To this day, the Shaper's magical and technological prowess remains unrivaled. One thing is clear, none of their marvels would have been possible without...
Tahar, may I help you with something?
What exactly is it that fascinates you about the Shapers?
Oh, Tahar, that's quite a topic. I don't mind sharing, but are you sure you want to go there?
I am. Tell me.
All right. Well, where do I start? You see, the Shapers have always fascinated me. They're all over Io. These remnants of a once so glorious civilization. Yet for some reason, so many people are almost oblivious to it. On the one hand, of course, that's very sad. On the other hand, it also makes it a lot more exciting. It's like I'm a treasure hunter, only that everyone else fails to see the treasures around us. Tell me, Tahar, when seeing all of this, don't you sometimes feel like you're exploring a childhood dream? The kind of world the poets and the bards always spoke of?
The Shapers are dangerous. Just think of that Steel Guardian we fought to get in, or the Ghost Watchers. Not what I'd call a childhood dream.
Well, yeah, but it doesn't take away from the wonderment, does it? But this childish fascination was only the spark. The more I studied the Shapers, the more enthralled I became with their culture. Did you know that at the pinnacle of their existence, they ruled over all of Io? A global empire with no one to oppose them.
You seem to consider that a good thing.
Oh, good, bad, the world doesn't work like that. Of course, there are writings that hint at the fact that the Shaper Empire wasn't all rainbows and unicorns, but still it was stable. And it persisted for tens of thousands of years. Can you imagine? All this knowledge, all this art, all this wisdom. Nothing in the Io of today can match that. Nothing. It's like comparing a sea full of secrets with a puddle of muddy water.
How do you know all this?
Some of it from writings, some of it's just connecting the dots. I know how many scholars are out there at the universities giving their talks about the inscrutable empire, but it's not nearly as inscrutable as they say. Their problem is they're trying to understand the Shapers by reading books and dusty tablets. That's not how it works. You need to get out there, into the field. And even if it takes years of fruitless digging, eventually you're bound to stumble onto something. Another piece of the mosaic.
Very poetic.
Because it is.
My father always told me the Shaper Empire relied a lot on slaves.
What? No, that's rubbish. The Shapers had castes, yes, and it's probably the lower castes your father was referring to. But to call these slaves is like calling, say, a tanner who was born outside a royal family a slave, just because he'll never be a king. And even the very lowest caste, the Zalanir, always had enough to eat, a roof over their heads, and could, without paying a single coin, get themselves healed by a cleric if they needed to. So if you think that's unjust, go ahead. Ask an Everlight beggar which era he'd rather live in. He's not a slave, yes, but in some ways he's worse off.
And how exactly did their empire come to be? They must have conquered quite a few nations.
They had the liberty of being the first living civilization on our EO, at least as far as we know. That made it easier to maintain peace and stability. Until the end and the dragons.
And yet, they died out.
Yeah. A great mystery.
Most scholars think it was the dragons.
They do, but I doubt it. You saw what the Shapers were capable of. Even a race as powerful as the dragons couldn't have wiped them out. And you see the shape this city is in, Tahar. There's no traces of fire and destruction. But regardless of what it was, it doesn't change the fact that the way the current races of this world treat the Shapers is nothing short of pathetic. They were greater than we'll ever be. But instead of studying this greatness, we ignore them. And why? Just because it doesn't fit into our religion, our traditions, or whatever reason they can come up with. Because to many, admitting what a marvel the Shapers truly were would mean admitting that our culture is pale in comparison.
Is our world really that bad?
That depends on your expectations. We could do worse, certainly, but if this is as good as we can get, then I have nothing to feel but pity.
Maybe you're right. There's a lot we could learn from the Shapers.
Well, I'm sorry you feel that way. In any case, I suppose you found your answer, haven't you? This is what fascinates me about the Shapers. They're a reminder of what we could be, if only we wanted to.
I see. Well, thanks for the explanation, Iskrim. I appreciate it. I'd still like to know more about how you ended up in Nortender.
Bugger and blast. And here I was hoping you'd forgotten. All right, I'll tell you. But only under one condition.
Yes?
That I get to ask you a personal question too.
Then we have a deal. Go ahead, I'm listening.
Fair enough. I was born in the Windwall Mountains.
You don't say.
Sorry, still sorting out my thoughts. It's been a long time since I last told this story to anyone. Alright, one more time. As you can imagine, I was born in Windwall, a child of the rocks.
Come again?
A true dwarf, as some would say. Born in the buried city, not on the outside as the traders and farmers are. My family was quite privileged. Not nobility, but my mother and father led a big smeltery which supplied one of the finest smithies. Moon silver weaponry. Ever heard of it?
I think so. The commanders of the Royal Army use them.
Figures. Well, my childhood was a rather unremarkable one. I had 2 brothers and a sister, and even though I was the oldest child, I was always the most quiet one. I learned quickly how to wield an axe, and I still know how to do it, but I never took pleasure in it. The same goes for my parents' craft. For some reason, Nihalf had given me a talent for metallurgy, but not the desire to use it. Instead, my biggest love was always made with ink. Books.
But I assume your parents didn't approve of that.
Oh no, they didn't mind. I had 3 siblings who could do the job as well as I, so the future of our family was secured. On the contrary, they were quite accepting, which wasn't usual amongst dwarves, especially not those in Windwall.
Are the surface dwarfs different?
Depends. There are some who were very open-minded. For example, the traders who get around a lot. On the other hand, there are some who were as ignorant as the Windwallers.
Dwarves are traditionalists, aren't they?
Oh yeah, they are. They love their brawls, they love their ale, and they love their metal crafting. And they never miss a chance to tell the outside world just how much they do.
Well, to be honest, when I think of dwarven culture, that's exactly what comes to my mind.
See? And that's the problem. There's always diversity in every race. There are soft-hearted orcs, there are elves who don't give a damn about the white tree, and there are humans with... well, you get the point. What I'm trying to say is, many dwarves love living these traditions, but there are some like me who just don't fit in. This is one of the reasons why I appreciate you and this group so much, Tahar. Aenir's tools or not, we're all pariahs, in one way or another.
I guess that's true. So, what happened? Why did you leave Windwall?
I'm getting there, Tahar. When I came of age, I found work in the Windwall Library. It sounds more impressive than it is. Basically just 4 blocky granite walls filled with a dozen bookshelves. Nothing compared to the great libraries of Finn and Mere or even Everlight. That time was also when I deepened my knowledge of the Shapers. I devoured all the books there were, and bought whatever writings the merchants brought in. They smiled at me, talked of me as the strange bird, but I didn't care. The more I read, the more spellbound I became, and the more I dreamed of journeying through Io to solve all those mysteries not yet uncovered.
Are there Shaper ruins in the Windwall Mountains?
Hardly. And those that are there are buried beneath miles and miles of rock. Impossible to access without a huge expedition.
Huh. And what kept you from doing just that?
Well, 2 things. First of all, my attachment to my family. Secondly, Gilak.
Gilead?
My, partner.
You had a partner?
Yeah, we met... I'd rather not go into detail too much. Fact is, we lived together for 6 years. He was very dear to me. Let's put it that way.
What are dwarven families like?
Similar to their human counterparts, I believe. Having family and offspring is considered to be very important, especially if you're of noble blood.
But living with someone of the same sex is acceptable?
Well, yes and no. If you do, you don't talk about it, and you should make sure to find yourself a wife or a husband to found a proper family, eventually, and bring new children of stone into the world, even if that family is just a charade. If you don't do that, you're frowned upon. There's even a word for a childless dwarf, man or woman. Galrag, which roughly translates as dusty boulder. Very amusing, I know.
That's sad.
Well, I doubt it's going to change anytime soon. And once again, the Shapers were different in that regard. As long as you stay within the boundaries of your caste, you could do as you pleased.
I understand. But something happened, didn't it?
Yeah. The Blackstone Rebellion. Ever heard of it?
No.
A coup. A small group of rebels tried to overthrow the royal house. It was bound to fail from the beginning. The rebels were anti-traditionalist and wanted to establish a new order, where it's the people who have the power, not the nobility. Gilak was one of these rebels.
Oh.
Yeah. At first, before the coup, they tried to raise awareness by giving underground speeches. A noble endeavour, but not at all thought through. Most dwarves just don't care about politics as long as they can have their mugs of ale. First, he didn't ask me to participate, but the more sour things went, the more he started pushing me. At one point, we had a fight. When he asked me to steal money from my family to support the movement, it was terrible. Finally, push came to shove, and he told me of the coup. He knew that despite my occupation, I was a remarkable fighter and Earthshaper, which is why he asked me to fight alongside him. You can make a difference, that's what he said. By Nihalf, he was just so naive. He really thought it would be like in the old legends, a group of courageous dwarfs fighting their way to Algrim Castle with me at his side. I just don't... Forgive me. It's strange to talk about it like this. You You can imagine how torn I was. I knew he'd die if the coup took place, but I also knew that I couldn't stop him. When I told him he was mad, he called me a coward, a delusional bookworm, who'd rather spend his whole life dreaming about the past than changing the present. And then he left. The next day, I found him beheaded by a royal guard. They didn't even make it to the castle stairs.
I'm sorry, Iskrim.
It's all right.
What happened then?
I ran. Not only because I'd rather have died than return to that empty house of ours, but also because they would have arrested me too. Our relationship wasn't a secret, and in their eyes, I was as eccentric as Gilak and his friends. And we all know how dangerous eccentrics are, don't we? I left my family a letter, telling them not to come after me, bought a horse, and rode as far as it would take me before collapsing. That was 9 years ago. I haven't returned ever since.
What about your family? Did you ever hear from them again?
Not directly. Every now and then, I return to a big city to find a dwarf who can tell me about Windwall. But the thought of returning, I don't know. I know it's cruel toward them, but I just don't think I could ever bear setting foot in those cursed stone halls again.
I see. And since then, you've been studying the Shapers?
Yeah. If there really is, as people say, a silver lining to everything, then this would be it. I'm finally doing what I was too afraid to do back in Windwall. I'm living my dream. Though the price I paid for it was high. And you know what, Tahar?
What?
There's a third reason to my fascination with the Shapers I haven't told you about yet. It's Gilak. Stupid as it may sound, there's a part of me who wants to prove him wrong. To show him that the past has value, that it can guide us towards a better world.
I see. Well, thank you for sharing this, Iskrim. I appreciate it.
Yeah. It felt good to talk about it. I didn't expect that. But you're not off the hook yet. The question, remember?
Right. Shoot.
Your past is even more unusual than mine. Growing up with a man like Isamu Tahar as your father? Without a mother? And then the whole thing with the Mage Rebellion? I know you've been through a lot. Now, I was wondering, if you could trade that past you've had for a different one, would you do it?
What kind of a past could I choose? Anything?
Anything.
I wouldn't.
That surprises me, to be honest. But I think I understand. Either way, pleasure speaking with you. Hope this wasn't too grim for you, but then again, you asked for it. Give me some time now, will you?
Sure. Take care, Iskrim. Understood. Will do. Got it. Interesting. How are you holding up?
Fine, I guess. Thanks for asking. You know, Corporal, I've been meaning to ask you something.
Yes?
Well, not knowing your mother and all that shit your father put you through. Do you ever feel lost?
Why do you want to know?
Oh, I'm just wondering, I guess. So, what's your answer?
I manage.
I see. You know, I haven't told you that yet, but actually our pasts aren't so different. Save for the fact that my father didn't try to conquer the world, at least not that I know.
How are our pasts alike then?
Simply put, I also didn't know my mother. And my father was a bastard if there ever was one.
What happened to your mother?
She died giving birth to me.
I'm sorry.
It's alright. As I said, I never knew her.
I take it you and your father aren't on good terms then.
You are of great wisdom, Tahar. No, we were not. I was and still am the only heir of the family, and if there's anything my father ever cared about, it was prestige. You see, it might not be obvious, but I'm actually of noble blood. Pure blood, as Finn and Mir elves call it. Nothing impressive, small nobility. You know, similar to the kind of Nortander nobility that's always around at royal festivities, licking everyone's boots so that they just don't forget about them.
There's nobility in Finn and Mir?
Oh, yes, there is. They don't call it that, but essentially Finn and Mir is an aristocracy.
How so?
Well, as you might know, elven culture heavily revolves around the White Tree, a gift from their goddess Ellen. Simply put, the tree is revered and guarded by a group of mages, of seers, called the Council. They're the rulers of our country, 6 women and 6 men. Now, according to the ancient lore, when a seer dies, his or her successor is chosen by the Council. However, it has become custom that a seer should be replaced by someone from his bloodline. Someone pure, as they call it.
Which means they make sure that the power stays within the right families.
Indeed. And even though elven families in themselves are small, if you count all the cousins, aunts, and uncles, the members of just one council family could populate a whole township. In other words, the closer your blood ties with the council, the closer you are to the White Tree. And thus, the higher your standing.
So I assume your father put you under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. I barely had a childhood. It was all stern-faced teachers instead, trying to feed me language, history, math, and magic from the day I could speak. And I can't even remember all those festivities and religious ceremonies I had to attend. It was as if I learned the meaning of the word small talk before I learned how to ask for my mother's teat. Not that she would have been around to listen.
How about friends?
Oh, that's another topic. I was allowed to go out and play as long as it was with the right people. Still, I didn't, which was my choice, really. One of the few I made in those years. I preferred to stay on my own.
How come?
I don't know. See, I've always felt a bit ahead of others. As you know, we think in other dimensions than you do. Our lives are a lot longer. What that means is that an elf who has seen 20 winters is still considered and looks like a child. Thus, behaves as such. I just never felt at home with most people, especially around my age. And that feeling never changed.
What was your father hoping to gain from this?
Isn't it obvious? He wanted to marry me off, and thus expand our petty little family's prestige.
If he simply wanted to arrange a marriage for you, then why teach you magic, maths? When these things happen in Nortander, it's usually more about, how shall I put it?
The looks?
And the ancestry, yes.
Well, these things play a big role in Finn and Mir too, but to be considered a good match, education and magical talent are just as important. For a priest, let alone a pure blood, to be seen with an uneducated, non-gifted street elf is frowned upon, not to say forbidden. Also, from what I've learned, it's mostly young women and girls who get married off in Nortander, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, this isn't the case in Finn and Mir. If the head of a family decides to do so, a young boy or a young man may have the same fate as the one I just escaped by a hair's breadth. But this is a topic you could fill books with. Probably not for now.
But it never came to that?
Almost.
I see. Where is your father now?
Dead as a doornail. He got assassinated some years before I was allowed into the priesthood.
Assassinated? What happened?
He got mistaken for someone else. But it doesn't really matter. let's not talk about it.
I'm sorry.
Oh, don't be. To be honest, I'm glad he's dead. Otherwise, I would be in bed next to some 200-year-old seer now. You see, Tahar, if there's one thing I took away from all that, it's that there's no greater power in life. Or, if there is, it doesn't care. Murderers live to be 100, children die in the birth beds. Ultimately, the biggest fallacy is that we like to believe that there's someone who gives a damn. We're on our own, and we have to make the best out of whatever life throws at us. I did. And even though not all worked out as I had planned, I'm here. And I'm free.
But you still feel lost sometimes, don't you?
Yeah, I do. But I'm working on it. Anyway, we digressed quite a bit, didn't we? Sorry, my fault. Sometimes I just talk too much. I'll see you around, Tahar. And thanks for listening.
Understood. Got it.
Zal Raka.
Gore, how are you and the Fire Wielders settling in?
All right, I guess. Though there've been some quarrels between my warriors and these mercenaries. But don't worry, I took care of it. And that Rowan promised to do the same. Nonetheless, Tahar, I have to say it. I don't like this place. Not at all.
Why not?
I guess it's the people who once lived here. The Shapers. They were corrupted. And I can feel that corruption even now.
Corrupted?
Yeah. Their customs, their culture. They were completely detached from the order of nature.
How so?
Do you even need to ask? Just look around. Ghost warriors, strange machines, strange buildings. Especially this place, this Nexus. They thought they were above everything, even the gods. And they meddled with things they didn't understand. It's disgusting.
Well, they're dead now.
Maybe. But I can still feel their presence. Anyway, nothing we can do about it. If the Shapers caused the blood burn, I understand why we need this place. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Huh?
What's it like to change form? I've been wondering about that since I met you.
I can imagine. It's exhilarating and strange at the same time. If it taught me one thing, then it's how foolish it is to put the mind above every other aspect of the body. Many people do that, especially scholars or mages.
What do you mean?
Because the shape of our flesh is so much more than just a shell. It defines us. When I take on the form of a wolf, for example, this wolf isn't just me with fangs and paws. It's a different version of myself.
A different version?
Yes. You can't understand if you haven't been there. But I guess you could say that when I'm taking on a creature's form, a part of my mind gets infused with that creature's essence. The thirst for the hunt. Thinking as part of a pack, just to name the most obvious aspects. They meld with my mind. When I was young and first started shifting, the creature always dominated. It was like a feverish dream, and I had almost no control over my actions. With time, it got better.
Did you ever completely lose control when you were in another form?
In the beginning, yes. But the Elder always made sure I was in a controlled environment when I did my first transformations.
How does it feel to shift into a spider?
Strange. Being a mammal, a wolf or bear, it feels different, but still somehow familiar. A spider is something else entirely. The way you see, the way you perceive, the way you feel. The first time I shifted, I couldn't bear it for more than a minute, and it haunted me for weeks after that.
Yeah, I imagine. How do you learn a new form?
That's complicated. First you have to understand that creature, observe it, live with it if possible. That can take months, years, sometimes decades. Then there's what we shamans call the first joining. You have to visualize your shift.
How does that work?
I can't explain it. It's like your first bloodshed. It can't be explained, only experienced.
So in theory, could you transform into anything? Even, say, a wyvern, a dragon?
In theory, yes. In practice, there's no known shapeshifter who has ever done that. Save for old Orcish legends, maybe.
Why not?
First off, there aren't many dragons around to study. And even if there were, you aren't likely to survive it. Secondly, transforming into something that enormous, it can be lethal. Our minds, our essence just isn't fit to govern such a massive body. Only some years ago, there was talk of an Ash Reaver shifter who had attempted to morph into a troll. He succeeded, but his heart, the troll's heart, stopped before he could take a single step. So you see why most shifters aren't that eager to experiment.
Wow, that's definitely interesting. Thanks for taking the time to explain.
Sure.
Back in Bar Gagor, you told me that you think the Orcs should strive to be more. What do you mean by that? Do you consider your culture to be, well, inferior?
Inferior? No, not at all. On the contrary, I'm glad to be a fire wielder, and not a human or an elf.
Why?
Because not so unlike the Shapers, your culture is bigoted, strange. You like to tell yourselves you're more than the animals you slaughter for food. You call yourselves civilized. But in the end, you look for the struggle just as anything and anyone else does. But of course you don't admit to it. You want to be better than that. And the result are lies, intrigue, wars, and assassinations. Their culture is so bizarre that it's almost amusing.
Well, you have a point.
I know. So no, I don't consider our culture to be inferior. But we've gone astray. Fools such as Krell was one. They're the reason your race looks down on us. If Zakrak had wanted us to be ever-fighting, ravaging brutes, he wouldn't have given us minds to begin with. Every brawl, every battle, every war has to have a purpose. It isn't something done for pleasure. Yes, it can be enjoyed. But at its core, it is ritual. The most basic one of nature.
In other words, violence and war are good and necessary, but only within measure?
Yes, and it should be learned from. That's where most orcs disagree. They claim to value wisdom, but when asked to choose between words and a club, they always choose the club. And as you see, this is why our culture has stagnated. In its current state, there will never be an orc empire, a great tribe, or the earth-shaking horde Zarek envisioned.
So what you want is to lead your people to a better future?
You make it sound so dramatic. For now, the Fire Wielders are a good start. And by helping you, they will hopefully see that diplomacy and strength don't always contradict each other. After that, we shall see.
Don't you think a world without violence is possible?
No.
Why? Isn't that what we should all aspire to?
We should aspire to a lot of things. But tell me, Tahar, this world has existed for millennia. And has there ever been peace? Lasting peace?
At times, yes.
At times, exactly as I said. Our very existence is based on conflict. Finding food, not freezing to death. Living means to struggle. Your people, with your warm clothes and banquets, try all in your power to forget that fact. But you can't, because ultimately, there's as much thirst for struggle in you as in an orc. What we orcs believe is that we should embrace it, that we should just face the truth, even if it's ugly. That the ways of nature can't be changed by its creation. It's like fighting the tides.
So what? Do we just kill each other whenever we feel like it?
No, that's what Krell wanted. And that's as stupid as denying the struggle altogether. What we need is a way to channel our urges. Ceremonial battles, arenas, a society that is centered around survival and strength, and gains, rather than loses stability from it. Because if we simply suppress these urges, such as humans, the elves, and the dwarves do, they will at one point only erupt even more violently.
I never looked at it that way. But I think you might be right.
You never fail to surprise, Tahar. Anyway, where were we?
Did you always have these ambitions?
No.
Then where did they come from?
None of your business, Tahar. Sorry.
All right. Well, thanks for explaining.
Sure.
How did you become a shapeshifter?
I was chosen.
And how does that work?
Complicated. Are you sure you want to hear the whole story? Time isn't exactly on our side.
It isn't, but the more I know about your abilities, the better. You're fighting for me, after all.
We're not fighting for you, Tahar. We are fighting alongside each other. That's a big difference.
Alongside, then.
Good. Let's make it short, then. Shapeshifting is a gift of Zarek. One that only the best of his shamans are granted.
And how does one become a shaman?
He has to be chosen by a tribe's chieftain. You see, magical talent is a lot rarer among orcs than it is among humans or elves. In my tribe, there was only me and Rain. We both discovered our talent by chance. I, when I was 9, and put out a fire that had broken out in my family's hut. Everybody was asleep, even the damn fool that had been tasked to stand guard. When I woke up, the entire room was in flames.
So it was your magic that woke you?
No, I needed to take a piss.
Makes sense. What happened then?
I panicked and started screaming, as every child would have. However, the only thing that did was make me inhale the fumes even quicker. My vision blurred and I lost consciousness. When I woke up again, I was on a bed of hay in the village shaman's tent, and everybody was staring at me, as if I was Zarek incarnate. I asked what happened and they told me. Just when I had lost consciousness, it had started to rain. Not just a little. It was a full-fledged storm, a deluge from the skies. With not even a minute, all the tents in the village had been flooded. The fire wasn't extinguished right away, but was quickly put out by the other orcs that had been awoken by the storm.
That's impressive.
Well, it was also my last successful weather ritual. If it hadn't been, Barker Gore would be all meadows and forests by now. According to my brothers, I had an orange shimmer in my eyes and was muttering strange words when they took me to the shaman. She told me that was a clear sign that I was gifted and that I had fire in my blood. as my tribe likes to say. Of course, it changed my life entirely. All of a sudden, I was my Cal's pride. It was strange, not just for me, but also for my kin.
How did your family take it?
Well, they were proud, but they also weren't sure how to treat me anymore. For example, my father stopped taking me out on the hunt because he was afraid that something might happen, which is ridiculous. Shaman or not, an orc who can't wield a spear isn't an orc at all. Also, my siblings became withdrawn. Jealousy, of course, but also estrangement. All of a sudden, their baby brother had become this strange being, which had apparently been bitten by Zarek himself.
It's always like that. Being different isolates you.
I guess.
Who trained you? The healer?
Yes, but only about her craft. Primitive ghost callings, alchemy, medicine. I learned my magic from an elder who lived in a tiny shack a 15-mile march from our village. I woke up every day before dawn, walked for 2 hours, served him, and received my lessons, then returned to my Cal shortly before midnight. It was hard, yes, but it was insightful. Those long walks in the darkness, the solitude at the foot of the mountain where his shack was, they shaped me.
Interesting. And who is this Rain you mentioned earlier?
Did I? Well, that's complicated. I don't want to talk about it.
All right. Regarding this Rain you told me about,
No, Tahar. Accept it.